The airline industry is one of the most competitive and volatile industries in the world, with an average net profit margin of only around 5%, and with an increase in a bunch of low-cost carriers, as well as pressure from premium carriers as well. This has made it very difficult to succeed in this industry. And although your company, Cathay Pacific, has seen strong historical success, as of late, you have suffered through some hard times. Today, we're here to help your company succeed in the future and talk about what you can do to succeed over the next couple years. Thank you so much for having us, executives at Cathay Pacific. My name is Ankur, and with me I have my colleagues Colton, Ali, and Jordan. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation. The key problem that we've identified here is what should Cathay Pacific's 3-year plan be? And you've already brought in McKinsey to do some things we'll talk about, but from here, what is that 3-year plan? What does that look like? We believe that what you need to do is actually to sell the Cathay Dragon brand and focus on the premium market. And we'll get into why we chose this path within our presentation. The impact of this will be an immediate cash inflow, as well as a premium airline that you can really market and brand moving forward. So to start off the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about what the people over at McKinsey recommended and what you've done with their recommendations.
So overall, as you know, there was major cost-cutting endeavors because you haven't been profitable over the last year, and so 190 management jobs and 400 non-management jobs were let go. This was all done within the corporate headquarters because the unions are so strong within the flight attendants that you weren't able to make any headway in cost-cutting there. But offering the actual pilots and such initiatives to do cost cutting, 740 of these initiatives were put in. So ultimately, there was a cost that came along with this, though. So with redundancy packages, you had to spend $300 million to make this, which is definitely going to be a piece of this current year that you're trying to come out of. And then Ali will explain a little bit of the impacts.
Mm-hmm. Now, over here. Now, assuming that this $400 million is what can be saved.
Just back up a little bit.
Oh, I apologize, thank you. Assuming that this $400 million is what can be saved over the next 3 years. Now, a third of that, assuming you could save a third of that next year, that'd be $1.3 billion. Now, within this first year, you've already incurred a $2.05 billion loss. Now, if we were to add that savings in to what the loss that's already occurred, then you would still have a negative profit margin this year. And so what we see is there's this immediate need for cash. And overall, this program is aiming to save 30% of your costs over the next 3 years. And so we want to make sure that that can be achieved. We don't know if that, at the moment, we don't see that happening.
So a lot of these cost-cutting measures, although they are helping you in terms of cutting costs, one of the impacts that they had, one of the negative impacts that they had is a negative impact on morale. And employee morale has been dramatically impacted, which actually we see has led to a negative impact in service quality. So in 2014, you were ranked #1 in terms of service providing by an esteemed airline magazine. You're now ranked at number 50. We traced this to 3 major factors. #1, there was a dramatic decrease in customer service efficiency. So #2, there was an increase in the frequency of safety issues. So this was a huge thing that people were talking about. And #3, negative word of mouth on major media outlets and social media. So for example, there was an incident in 2015 where there was bacteria in the water. That spread through negative word of mouth and really diminished your brand equity, which actually resulted in some harms to your brand positioning, something Jordan will talk about.
Yeah, so if we take a look at kind of where you were, kind of when you started up this company, we can see that you're up here with the high quality, high cost area. But what happened as with all these issues that we've kind of discussed came about, we saw you move down. Your costs remained the same, but the quality as perceived by customers was not the same. And so what we want to do going forward is find a way to get you to move back up here so that you can still have that high quality and you still have that great customer base.
Now, there was quite a bit to consider here with your financial position. Now here, we can see that over 2016, there was a loss incurred of 575 million Hong Kong dollars. That was about 0.6% of your revenue in 2016. Now, in the upcoming year, as I've mentioned, we see that we have a loss already coming your way. As well, there are many other costs to be considered. There were the redundancy payments of $300 million last year to your employees. there's the illegal cartel behavior fine as well coming due, and that was 0.5% of 2016 revenue. An order of 53 new aircraft in 2024, which would amount to 795 billion in revenue, assuming that each would cost $15 billion each. Now, overall, it is essential to cut costs at this point, but as I pointed out before, I don't believe that this $4 billion cost-cutting program will reach that 30% target and make you profitable in the near future. Now, the key revenue drivers here, we can see that Cathay is very similar to your peers, and so we see that on average, most of your revenue does come from your passenger services, but we're seeing a change in focus in the industry towards these ancillary products and these non-seat revenues as being the drivers for this additional revenue. Now, being that the highest, the peak of profit was 5% profit in 2016 for the global industry, it's a very narrow profit margin, so it's very important to consider these small costs that make a large difference in your industry. Now, as well for fuel costs, in 2016, it made up 34% of your revenue, of your total costs. Now, here we can see that over the past few years, so the price of oil has been rising within the last year, and so these losses that you've been incurring from your fuel hedging when the prices of oil dipped very low, the losses will be decreasing, but it is still a large risk as we're not seeing $100 barrel oil that we've seen in the past. As well, what we're seeing is that your passenger yield, so the amount of money that you're getting from your passenger, has decreased by 20% since 2012. And as well, you're also you're increasing amounts of available seat kilometers and available ton kilometers. So you have increasing capacity and your yield is decreasing. So it's very important to address the needs for cash that you have and how to capitalize on those available opportunities. As well, just to consider some external factors here. So your break-even load factor is 123.5% of the capacity. So what you're reaching right now is 84%, 85%, which was along and better than your peers, but it's impossible to reach that 124%, so you're never going to reach that break-even price that you'd seen in 2016. Now, market demand is expected to increase, and this is something that you could capitalize on, as we're seeing that 5.5% growth in traveling demand, and that air travel will become more popular throughout the globe. As well, we have to consider the risk of oil prices, as I pointed out before, whether they fluctuate. So continuing to hedge would be a good idea to whether oil prices continue to rise or drop. It would be that risk management aspect that we want to consider. As well, we have to consider the high fixed assets that your industry has. They have a long life term, 25 to 30 years, but they are depreciating very fast. Now, also the changing industry trends, increasing capacity could be something that also saves you costs, as well as price-based competition is going to be very large in the next couple of years with your other peers.
Now, looking at the external environment as well, it's important to realize Hong Kong's positioning when it comes to the new Belt and Road policy initiated by China. So by 2020, it's foreseen that Hong Kong will be one of the biggest hubs globally for flights coming into Asia and connecting to this road and belt that connects all the way from to Europe, Eastern, the Middle East, and up into China. And so taking advantage of the partnerships that you already have in the next few years will be very important so that you can become an international company that can bring the world to China.
So what this all told us is kind of the key issues that your company is facing right now. So employee morale, you just laid off a bunch of people, and right now that's not going as well. The cost, like Ali just mentioned, you're in an immediate need for cash in order to continue operating. Also brand positioning, and then service quality. Your customer service has decreased significantly, as we saw in that chart that I talked about previously, and then your product offering isn't quite clear. You have the few different brands. But what we really want to focus on is this brand positioning of what is your brand? Who is your company? So what this led us to do is create two different alternatives specifically on how your company can move forward. So we looked at, just so there's not so much words there for you to read, So the first one, create two divergent brands. So you have the Cathay Pacific, which is kind of more that premium, well, it was intended to be that premium brand, and then the Cathay Dragon, which is more kind of close to that low cost where it's highly competitive. And so this method of these two different brands has been proven. We've seen different airlines have these different airline brands underneath, and it also you can capitalize on both of those. But however, there's so many of these cheap airlines within the industry that would be very hard to compete. And then you'd also have to work on bringing that Cathay Pacific back up to the premium, so you can differentiate between the Cathay Pacific and Dragon. So then moving on to the second one, selling the low cost, which is the Cathay Dragon, and focusing on the premium brand. So why this one is good is it gives you that cash that Ali has emphasized that we need, and it also focuses your effort internally, kind of unifying your brand, and you're able to position this to externally to your customers. So in order to evaluate these alternatives, we have 3 different criteria. So aligning with those macroeconomic trends we're seeing in the environment, solidifying your brand so people are clear what it is, and improving future profitability so that you can continue operating. So when we evaluated these alternatives, we definitely saw that selling the low-cost brand hit all 3 of the criteria, and so we're recommending that you move forward with this one.
So I apologize for the smudges, but what we would like you to do is rebrand your company as Cathay Global, and to do this, we would like you to implement the SOAR recommendation. What SOAR stands for is start the transformation, offer the Cathay Dragon, activate those services that you need to kind of create those profits, and then really rebrand as that premium and hit the market hard for the consumers.
So to start the transformation, one of the things that we mentioned repeatedly throughout this presentation is the dip in employee morale. So that's the thing that we would like your company to focus on to start. So we recommend creating an Employee Engagement Task Force, or EETF. The main purpose of this task force is to collect information about key concerns within your employees and really gauge where employee morale is at and craft strategies to improve employee morale and get them back into working on the company and the strategic vision. We also recommend getting into a staff engagement T, where you segment staff by flight staff, corporate staff, and management staff, and you talk to them over a casual setting with T to talk about what are some things that they're concerned about, what are some things that they can do to help guide them through this transformation process. We also recommend creating a survey for employees to fill out as well. And finally, we recommend using this time to really announce the changes both internally as well as the public.
So now that you've taken care of your people internally, it's time to address the finances and the external view. This is where Offer Cathay Dragon comes in. So we recommend that you would announce the sale, the intended sale of Cathay Dragon in order to find a buyer and receive a preferable price for this company. At the same time, you would announce your intentions to transition into this new Cathay Global brand from your Cathay Pacific and Cathay Dragon into this new brand, and announce a launch date for when you would expect this to happen. Now, one risk to consider is that what if a buyer is not found in this industry? What we would recommend is selling off pieces of this, either your airplanes or whether certain segments of the business that would be profitable. So if there's not one buyer that wants to buy Cathay Dragon as a whole, you could sell it in pieces. Or else you could sell interest to other parties in order to receive that cash right away. That would address some of those needs that you have at this very moment.
And because the low-cost carriers are trying to grow so fast and compete, they would be more willing to buy piecemeal and take those smaller planes. Because as you remember, you have an order for bigger planes coming in the future, so you need to kind of offload these smaller planes within an industry or market that's actually looking for them. The next thing you do is really need to activate these services. So this is what's happening before your official launch date of Cathay Global. First of all, what we've noticed is that applications and platforms are very important for the airline industry. There's things like check-ins, boarding passes, and all of these things that can make the whole experience better for the customers. The 3 key things that to make this service a little bit more luxury is food and rewards. So right now, Cathay is one of their differentiating features is food. Ankur, you came here from
The
Canada.
food was fantastic. It made all the difference in a 14-hour flight from Canada. If it wasn't for the food, I don't know what I would have done.
And our coach actually was recommended that we take Cathay for that reason. So that word of mouth is extremely important. In this, there needs to be an application where when you check in, there's the opportunity to maybe choose the different foods that you want, and then they can target it to your specific seat and create efficiencies on the airplane, so they're not asking who's eating what or overloading in different types of food. This can all be streamlined through the program. As well, setting up a rewards program. You currently have the Marco Polo, but this would be targeted much more towards corporate consumers. Because you're trying to position in a higher quality, you can be reaching out to companies in this stage before your launch. You can kind of offer that rarity feature where if they get in before your official launch, they're going to get bigger discounts at the launch. On the operations, you need to get your kitchens ready, and then you need to do a trial run just to make sure it works. There's also a small win you can do immediately is make 10 seats on all your airplanes. We've seen that there's really no difference in quality between those with 9 across and 10 across, so this is another easy win to get a little bit of more money coming in.
So now, what does that rebranding process look like? So to walk you through this, we want to talk about the 4 A's of consumer marketing. So awareness, attraction, the ask, and action. So we'll talk about that. So awareness and traction. How do you get people aware of Cathay Global and attracted to Cathay Global? So we recommend creating a new Cathay Global logo with the slogan, "From Hong Kong for the World," to describe how you are a global brand. We also recommend putting billboards across major airports, transit systems, to get people aware of the brand. Once they're aware of the brand, they're going to be liable to ask. This is where we recommend shifting from putting messaging out and moving on to social platforms. Research has shown that people are more trusting of word of mouth in their friend groups and on social platforms than they are on external messaging from brands. So the external messaging would be for the awareness phase, and from the asking phase where they're doing the research, this is where getting your customer service reps on Facebook, answering customer questions, and incentivizing customers to post reviews by saying, hey, if you post a review on how you were treated and how you liked the flight, we'll give you X% off your next flight or X feature off your next flight. So incentivizing that. Finally, action. So this is where we recommend moving flight features onto the app and integrating that with social media. Why do we recommend this? Because what we've noticed from a lot of cognitive psychology is that more than motivation or external triggers, the thing that drives customer action most is convenience. And this will make the customer purchasing process way more convenient.
Now, some financial considerations. What could you possibly receive for Cathay Dragon? Now, being that you bought Cathay Dragon from another Chinese airline several years ago, we estimate that it wouldn't take up more than 20 to 40% of your current revenue and overall value. And so selling it for that amount, we believe would be reasonable and provide you that cash needed to invest into this new operation and pay off those debts so that perhaps this year or next year you can receive that break-even price or even possibly a positive profit margin. Now, as well, the discount of the corporate partnerships would be important to consider. This could work in a way where companies, if they reach a certain level of flights that they take, then they receive a retroactive discount with you, so that you're ensuring that you are receiving their business before you're actually providing that discount to them.
So in terms of a timeline, what we recommend is in the very first couple months, that's when you get into that S part where you're looking at internally, looking at that employee engagement task force and what have you. From 2 to 8 months, that's when you look for a buyer, and you also work on expanding the 10 seats, work on a lot of these internal features, and we recommend launching the rebrand from 8 months onwards. In terms of a long-term consideration, that's where we recommend connecting with a lot of these Silk Road-esque airports along with that Silk Road initiative so that you have Cathay Global connected to this new initiative that's coming forward. Okay, so at the beginning of this presentation I asked, what is Cathay Pacific's 3-year plan? How do you succeed in one of the most competitive industries in the world? So what we recommend is to really sell Cathay Dragon. Focus on premium. Focus on the fact that you're a global premium brand that people want to fly on. And what we believe the impact of this will be immediate cash in the short term and a brand position as a premium airline in the long term that will help your company grow, expand, and thrive in what is the most competitive industry in the entire world. Thank you very much for your time. I'll now open up the floor to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for the presentation from the team of University of Alberta. Now we will proceed with our 15 minutes question and answers session. Judges will take your questions now.
You mentioned that about selling of Cathay Dragon, and
Right.
Cathay Dragon currently provide a lot of short-haul flights to China. So, is there any plans on how you plan to cater for this? Are you giving up the routes?
And one of the big things that we're seeing, this is really a long-term decision because of all the airports that are actually being created within mainland China there. There are a large amount of those discount flyers that are coming in, and what we see is that really the opportunity is already being snatched up by the market, and we need to be able to focus on our true value proposition, which is bringing the rest of the world to Asia. So yes, we will be giving those up, but within the next 20 years, we just do not, or the next 5 years, we do not have the ability to compete for those mainland flights.
In addition, in terms of the low-cost market, like Colton mentioned, it is a very crowded market. But we've noticed that in China, for example, in mainland China, there's been a dramatic increase in the amount of disposable income in the middle class, which has really risen to the upper middle class. And there's people that are willing to spend the money on services if they're flying a lot. And so we believe that Cathay Global is better positioned to serve that market as opposed to the low-cost flyer.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
I think one of the key things that where we are losing our market share is because the Chinese airlines and the Middle Eastern airlines are taking over all over the place. Now, you spoke about Belt and Road as a strategy where this is hinging on to connect to the world. At the same time, you're saying discount China internal. So doesn't it give a conflicting message to our customers and our loyal customer base, both in Hong Kong and in China?
And so one really important thing is the actual way in which airlines are going to be connecting to things like coaches and ferries within this system. And so when you work into creating partnerships, not just thinking about that people want to be doing domestic flights, because once these roads and ferry routes are developed, people won't be just looking at doing those domestic flights. So this is a really great opportunity for you in the long term to create more of a platform, since you're bringing the world to Asia through Hong Kong, a platform that you can also offer maybe bookings services for those internal other ways of transportation rather than just the internal flights.
Just a quick observation. Ferries and roads as compared to connecting flights makes a big difference. Right?
Mhm.
Right,
The
right.
travel time and this. Okay, I don't know if they have considered that.
And that is why the Belt and Road has been such a priority of China, because they want to make sure that whole system can be connected with buying one single ticket and then being able to flow properly from one transportation type to another type.
I have a follow-up question. What's the more important, in your proposition of selling Cathay Dragon? Is it just of a branding, or is it that we do need the cash? Which one is more important?
I think in the short term, the cash consideration would likely be more important. As Ali mentioned multiple times, you are in need of some cash. In the long term, I would say the branding consideration, I guess, is the more important consideration, because one of the things that we've seen is the branding confusion between what is Cathay Dragon, what is Cathay Pacific, how do those two brands differentiate? So to answer your question right now, I'd say cash, and in the long term, I'd say branding. Do you have anything to add, Ali?
Yeah, absolutely. The cost at this time, if you compare the two, if you're the premium industry to this discount industry, a lot of them are the same, right? Your fuel costs are not going to change depending on where you're flying to. It's going to be slightly because of the aircraft and slightly because of the benefits. But what you're going to be doing is receiving a higher ticket price because you're positioning yourself differently. And so it really is more of a benefit to go with this higher. The branding is important, but it is really this cash that you're able to get by going with this higher branding. So it's more profitable, and it's positioning you in a very favorable way.
I have a question on two of your assumptions. One is, what made you assume that we don't have corporate tie-ups? Number two is, we spoke about employees. You said we need to generate ideas in the first 2 months, but one of the clear statements is we got 740 ideas already given by the employees. So why do you think we need more fresh ideas in the next 2 months when we have already a repository of 740 with us?
And so within that first stage, if we could go to that slide actually, and could you clarify the first part of your question?
So corporate
So the
tie-ups,
first
you mean the
part,
partnerships
you
with?
mentioned that we need corporate tie-ups. What made you assume that we don't have tie-ups already?
And we do assume that you do have them, but this is a way in which to target specifically as a more luxury brand, because the corporations are looking for something luxury but also at a lower cost. So we're guaranteeing revenue with the way in which we structure this discount, so that they have to hit a certain amount of flights before they get their discount. And so it's not that you're not doing it, it's just that we're restructuring it to make sure you're hitting a certain amount of flights and getting that revenue.
Yeah, the second question.
And then the second question here. So these staff engagement teas and such aren't as much to pull information in. The task force that we have now is taking those 700 opportunities really and deciding which ones are the actual ones that need to be implemented. 700 is just too many to actually do in 3 years. The staff engagement teas are more to help positively integrate the teams, show them that the company actually cares about them, and really communicate that change. So it's not that we're asking for more ways to change. We've gotten all those. It's now, how do we actually take the ones we have, do them well, and communicate the future of this company?
Yeah.
It's also to help give those employees so that they feel like they have ownership within the company. So right now you just laid off so many people, and there's probably a lot of people concerned that are still working for your company that are thinking, what if I'm next? And that's what they're sitting there all day thinking about. Whereas if you have these little engagement teas where you can bring them in and actually listen to them in person as opposed to just an email or an online survey, it gives them the feeling that they're more involved in the corporation and will kind of reduce that kind of scare for them that they might be going next, because they gave you information, they're providing you value, and they kind of can have that ownership on themselves within the company.
By moving on to become Cathay Global, like the premium airline you mentioned, do you have any recommendations in terms of the mix of business class and economy class? Do you plan to further expand the economy class and vice versa?
We think that it would be a wise idea to certainly upgrade this economy class to feel like it is more premium, as well slightly expand the business class. Now, if we are targeting more corporate partnerships, then based on the demand that we're seeing in this launch phase, then maybe it's worth renovating in order to expand that business class to where we see the demand being. But if it was so, it wouldn't be a large amount. It would more be about focused on upgrading that economy class where citizens coming from around the world are coming to travel Central Asia.
And although there may not be, because by adding a 10th row, like we had said earlier, we're already doing renovations within that space. We're slightly reducing the overall space, but if we can provide them the feeling of luxury, the food choices, and more of an experience overall, that is what will make the economy feel a little bit more luxurious than it has in the past.
What's your view on the business model for the low-cost carriers? Alongside, all your propositions trying to get away from being a low-cost carrier. So what's your view on that?
I guess, and feel free to add on to anything I say, but I guess one of the things that we took in to look at was the dramatic increase in the amount of low-cost carriers. So I think Qantas Airways has Jetstar, there's a couple in Hong Kong, there's a whole bunch that are projected to fill the Chinese market. So we felt like as a brand that has traditionally been premium, you could have gone one of two ways, one being focusing on the premium image, or two, kind of diverging yourself two ways. And in a time where your resources aren't as high and you kind of need some focus for the next couple of years, we felt like singling out one side was a better strategic move. I'm not saying that low-cost carriers aren't necessarily a great strategic move. What I guess we're trying to say is that there's already a ton of people in that market, and it would be difficult to craft out a niche for Cathay Pacific or Cathay Global.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cathay Pacific, you originated as this premium carrier. That's where your original strength lies. And you do have a large uptake where your load capacity is the third highest of the peers that we've seen. Now, people do want to fly with you, and now focusing on this area where you have your core strengths, we really see is going to pay the most dividends.
Yeah, absolutely.
During this presentation, while we mentioned about financial implications, but it wasn't very clear on what the cash flows are going to be and what revenue stream we are looking for. The financial presentation was very light touch.
Sure,
Could you
let me-
elaborate a little bit on
Yes.
how much money we're going to make in the next 5 years based on the recommendations?
It's not as easy as the click and click, click of the
Yeah,
PowerPoint.
oh,
So.
A little weirder. Sorry about that. Let's give me a sec. Let's go wide out.
All right. Okay. So here what we've seen is that in 2016 your total revenue was 92 million and 751 billion. Now what we see from this is that if about 20 to 40% of your business is based on this Dragon Air, this Cathay Dragon, my apologies, then this is where we'd see that this revenue amount would lower initially as you're selling Dragon, but you'd have that cash influx, and so really your margins would be increasing. And so what we see from here, so just to point out here, so if we have this illegal cartel behavior fine coming up, I'll use this instead. So we have the fine here coming up, we have the order of the aircraft, we have this $2 billion loss. Easily this would amount to 5% of that 2016 revenue. Now this 5% that you have to pay in all these additional fines and et cetera and layoff fees, this is really the difference between being at that break even or that loss where you're seeing it now, or perhaps that 5% profit margin. Now if we're able to take that cash, so let's say it would be 20 billion. If you were able to receive 20 billion for Cathay Dragon, then you'd be able to be in the green within the first year, and then further invest that and be able to increase those margins. Now, it would certainly depend on how much all of the assets have been depreciated and what buyers you are seeing in the industry and what the market environment is like, whether there are certain premiums being paid for industries like this. Now, being that it is a low-cost carrier, we see it being a hot commodity, as we've mentioned before. Low-cost industry can be run very successfully, but at this point, we see it as being a drain on your business.
And then moving into the future, we see that the main revenue will go slightly against the trends, the map with of low-cost carriers, but really sticking with our core competencies. Actually, the map, the matrix.
Positioning chart.
Because one question you asked is where these new revenues come from when we actually make this plan. So as we had showed you, we had moved down here because we're at the same cost but lower quality. Before we can act, so what we need to do next is do our plan, which will bring us back up to the quality and even surpass where we originally were. And once we are there, we can increase the ticket price per ticket to increase that revenue per customer, and that's really where we're seeing the increases in revenue for the long term.
For the fuel hedging part, can you elaborate a bit more? So do you suggest that the fuel hedging strategy remains the same as currently?
Yeah, so certainly, let me just jump back to that here. So in 2018 here, we only have 44% of your current hedging complete. Now in 2019, you only have 8% of the oil that you'll be needing hedged. And so what we recommend is continue to hedge. And as you've been doing before, making informed decisions as best you possibly can. And that is what you did back in 2015, is make the most informed decisions that you could. No one could have foreseen the crash in oil. And so it's this risk management that's really important, that certainly continue to do the same thing as well. Everyone in the industry would have suffered a loss at these times because of this.
Very quick one.
Sure.
The recommendations have been on passenger side. How about cargo? Any thoughts on the cargo?
So currently you have about a 16% stake in one of the
60%.
60% stake. So go ahead.
Yeah. In the Hong Kong, so in the, I forgot the name of the company, sorry, my apologies, but they cover all the Hong Kong cargo. So you have a 60% stake in that. We would recommend, I guess, continuing your operations with that. We see some increase in demand with that, with the increase of companies such as JD.com or Alibaba that are doing a ton of shipping. So we do recommend continuing with that. We just chose to focus this presentation on the passenger side. And actually, as important as cargo is, the passenger side does derive the most amount of revenue, hence we decided to focus it there.
It was nearly about 2% 100% of your revenue would come from this cargo shipping as opposed to 98% from other portions.
And
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Sorry, we're running out of time. Thank you very much, everybody. And